Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmet Lewis, and my co-host, Mikael Christie Anson. How are things going, Mikael?
Today's pretty slow. Not much to report other than having woken up at the end.
I woke up.
How about yourself?
Yeah, it's basically the same. We're kind of... do we need to talk about lockdown? We're still in lockdown. Anyway, that's said. Other than that, I've consumed sufficient coffee to be semi-excited about speaking into a microphone for you guys. When I speak, see you guys mean our audience and not you. It's just one of those things. It's never ending, really.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to say I have some interesting news, but I have no news.
Do you?
No, there is no news.
No, that's not exactly. I don't really have any news either.
Kind of reminds me of there's one historic day in the history of one of the news channels over here where they basically said there's no news today and just played music for the 20 minutes that was meant to be a news segment rather than forcing some story for ratings. So,
On the complete opposite side of things, when I was binging on Chernobyl, on the Chernobyl disaster and like USSR stuff. Once I read that in the USSR they used to have whenever there would be like a large catastrophe or some major issue, the radio channels would just start playing classical music. And apparently, like when Chernobyl happened, like a lot of people in the country understood something was really wrong because the channels would just play classical music all day, and this was like unprecedented, basically.
It's kind of
must have happened.
Speaking of Chernobyl, actually, I was a bit of a segue from our normal thing. I was watching this series on Netflix called Dark Tourism the last couple of days, and it's about some dude. He's basically a Louis Theroux kind of copy documentary guy going to do strange things. But he had one episode in Japan, and it was quite interesting, where he done a tour inside the, as they term it, the difficult to return zone in Fukushima and that kind of prefect and zone. And they're like in there with like personal Geiger counters just to show how fucked the place is. And like the place is, I think a background radiation level of 0.2 is acceptable living standards. And like the places they want people to return to was up to like 7.1. So about 40 to 50 times a safe dose of radiation. And they're like, yeah, it's safe to go back to. And some of the higher places were like 9 point something, which one of the ladies was who was on the tour with your mom was into visiting nuclear sites and other stuff as a hobby, as you do. And she was freaking out because it was like massively over Chernobyl where you're not allowed to go into anymore. Yet Japan is
I mean, in Pripyat there, I have friends who went there 2 summers ago. And apparently, like most of the area around is reasonably safe, but there are pockets of more significant radiation. And of course, inside the safe confinement, you need to know what the hell you're doing, or else you will likely end up in trouble. But they built this like the dome around the site is I think it's the largest movable structure on land that's ever been created by humans, because they built it like quite far away. They had these kind of rail tracks that they kind of rolled the entire confinement and just placed it over. But this is not very handstand focused. So
I don't know. I kind of want to like
kind of a topic.
Let's just have a nuclear reaction podcast instead. But
maybe we should get Helgi on then, that actually knows what the fuck he's talking about, and not us two scrubbers.
Just one more comment on that. Like, so the Fukushima thing, they're visiting towns inside the exclusion zone. And if you've ever played Fallout or any of the Fallout games, it's literally Fallout in real life. You could actually go there and like, I don't want to say LARP Fallout because it wouldn't be LARP. It would just be real Fallout minus the power suits. Anyway, enough about me showing my power levels. So we're going to talk about all things. What is our topic today? All things related to the core. So we are going to talk about core in handstands. Do you need, basically just address all these things. I know it's quite a common question and other stuff we get asked here. So we're going to dump all that. Do you need core strength? Where these kind of myths come about, how much you actually need, what specific strength actually matters, and basically everything about that. So the first question I pose to you, Mikael, is how long a dish hole do I need to be able to do a straight handstand, and do I need to train it an infinite amount of times?
Yeah, that's the classic largest. I think it's still the largest misconception of handstands. There's loads of others too, but I think this one is kind of the longest lasting and the one that's the hardest not to crack. Even though, like, now most people within that community that knows what they're doing knows that it is not as important, and you'll most likely, like, there seems to be a kind of correlation between your ability and your, like, or your experience on your hands and your belief in this, basically being inversely proportional. Since most people who at least can do a pretty good handstand will tend to not focus on it, at least not as kind of a staple, a necessary thing for the handstand, because of course, as we've talked about before, standing on your hands, standing on your feet should be more or less the same. So, but there is an interesting thing that, like, I have heard thrown around a bit, which is that, like, in relation to me when I say it, but where people say, "Oh yeah, but you're so good at standing on your hands, so for you it's probably not as necessary as someone else." And whereas there might be some relevance to that, again, it comes more down to, like, how able you are to keep your shoulders and your hands in the kind of placement that you need, than you needing to learn some kind of mystical tension of the midsection. And I think it's also kind of, there's a lot of different concepts going into this. It's the entire, like, influence from gymnastics and all that. It's all kind of the mysterious center of the body stuff from yoga and so on. And I think a lot of these, and then, like, the fact that the fitness industry, I don't know when they started to talk about core, but I mean, it's something that has become more and more, like, kind of mainstream to use as a thing, and now it's, like, starting to get kind of debunked as an idea as well. And I think the fact that we speak about core, and, like, the core of anything, if you speak about, like, the core of a concept or the core of, like, a nuclear reactor, it is the most important thing, right? So I think it easily kind of establishes itself as a crucial kind of aspect of what we're doing, also because of its wording, whereas, like, it's not necessarily that's important.
Yeah, I think it's also, like, it's one of the things, looking at this from the fitness point of view, like, I've been through 2 or 3, like, if we look at the sort of news cycles in fitness, I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I've been to personally about 3 or 4 of them in terms of things I can remember, like trends coming and going and all this stuff. And core training, when I first in, was super important. And it was very funny because there was 2 distinct camps. One camp was like, belly button touches your spine and that's what causes stability. And the other one was like, no, inhale air into your belly button and squeeze everything around it like a belt. That causes stability. So you'd have, like, and when I first learned to squat, like, I was basically always trying to pull my belly button to my stomach or to my spine to basically stabilize it. And obviously it was overdone concept where people are like, navel retraction, possibly trying to explain the same thing, create intra-abdominal pressure. But then the kind of, then people began to question, like, what is the actual definition of core? And it ranges everything from the transversus abdominis muscle, so that kind of girdle muscle connecting kind of pelvis and ribs, all the way to basically everything that isn't arms, legs, and head. And that's kind of like, this gets to the core of it. Like, there's really no standard definition of what the actual core is. And there's a lot of things what it isn't. And that's probably one way to describe it. So arms and legs are not your core. Oh, that's great. So then, we could say, using the broader definition, we could say shoulders are part of the core. Scapula is part of the core. This is the kind of thing. Scapula is part of the core, but humerus is not part of the core. So it gets very interesting when you're just looking at what the actual definition. But for, I suppose, most of the people coming, this is the kind of thing. I feel a lot of it we're probably going to be speaking to the converted in this episode.
For sure.
But at the same time, it's like, this is kind of what, for me, what I want with core training, and a lot of thing is not rigidness. This is the kind of thing. People are trying to make this infinite block-like core that is unmoving, like a cement block. And I want to develop control. I want to give people options. And that's kind of what's going on here. It's like, oh, you know, if the body is, let's say you're in a straight line, and let's just use standing. If the body is maintaining a straight position, then it extends its balance beyond something else. It has to adopt a different balance strategy of deforming some parts of the body segment to maintain body mass over something. So you see this imbalance. Someone has gone beyond their capacity to maintain the straight line, and then something else has to default. If you're standing, you lean too far forwards, you shoot your ass backwards and bend your knees. Balance is maintained. It's basically the same thing. Equivalent things happen in a handstand, as we know, in our rebalance and our different levels of rebalancing. And then people will extrapolate this thing as like, oh, visually I see an arch in the lower back. That must mean they have lost the ability to contract the abdominals and maintain the kind of crunching position. Whereas most likely the problem has actually originated lower down, and what you're looking at is the effect of a cause and not the cause of the effect.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's and this is the number one thing. And the funny thing is that like you will, like as you are arching over and your legs start going in that direction, your rectus abdominis and stuff will start to fire because like things are moving. But unless you're able to reestablish by hand and shoulder, and again, anyone who can balance a handstand well for like a significant amount of time knows what I'm talking about. But I do find this kind of definition of it very fascinating because it is also a point where various factions within physical disciplines will be kind of modifying or creating their own descriptions of what it is to kind of either to be special, such as in fitness. I was like, oh yeah, most people define the core as this, but I'm special. I'm talking about the psoas muscle because the psoas muscle is connected like this and like that, blah, 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 blah. And they create kind of a narrative which makes it special. And regardless of that having any like real world connection or not. So I think that is a thing. And you see this, I mean, in martial arts, there's a lot like hara and like the kind of, I don't know what they call it in Chinese, but kind of dantian, exactly, like moving from the center of the body and stuff. And these in those contexts, it makes a sense because it's more kind of like an awareness thing and understanding the principles of movement within the art that you do. Fair enough. But when talking about specifically applying principles such as in handstand, it does become complicated. And when you start again, if you use that word core, it's very easy that you want to make the idea of a core small because a core is like there's a lot of stuff around the core and then it's a core, and if it's small it's specific, and then like the kind of your central mass is around your belly button, so that must be kind of where it all originates from and so on. And of course you need to keep this in relation to your hand, blah blah blah. But like I find it fascinating because you've seen loads of this talk about trans versus abdominis, that this is some sort of like secret inside muscle. It's that the kind of entire fallacy of small muscle versus big muscle, or like inner muscles versus outer muscles, and that I think like the inner is more secret and better and smart if you were developed enough, and the outer is bulky and unnecessary and dumb. And I mean, this is how a body works. While that concept, there's a drop of truth in it, because yes, when you're good, you can really feel like the minute details and respond appropriately, not use as much force and so on. But like the concept as a whole becomes very, very flawed. And it's funny, like my friend who's an orthopedic surgeon, he cuts this shit open all the time down by the hip and because he does a lot of hip replacements, and like he's been loads inside of people's stomachs and like that area. And I remember how do you bring
that up in a conversation? I'm loads inside your stomach. What do you do for a job? I get inside people's stomach.
Yeah, but he's very funny when he describes it, because he speaks about kind of like carpentry. Like, and I asked him about this. Yeah, but like the transversus abdominis versus like the external and internal obliques and stuff. And he's like, do you think anything looks like a fucking anatomy chart? You open it up, it's a total mess in there. And he says, and I'm like, what do you, yeah, okay. No, like fibers are fused and like things don't look the same, and like none of these things that you think make sense on paper, it isn't like that when you go in there, and like people look vastly different. So this is what I find very fascinating, and these kind of mythologies that are created within various environments. I've seen them in loads in circus, loads in fitness, loads in dance. In dance, there's tons of it. Again, kind of like incline technique and stuff, where people talk about like you're supposed to. There was some sort of impossible thing that someone asked me to do in a dance class once. I don't remember. It was like it's something that is physically impossible. Like as impossible as if you lean forwards, like with straight legs and a straight upper body, and you just hinge at the hips, you have to fire your hamstrings, or else like if you sedate the hamstrings and you do that, you fall. Like you need a pulling force there. But stuff like that, oh yeah, you're supposed to work from some other magical place rather than, because this is a big muscle, and that's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think like there's loads of kind of garble that comes into the conversation regarding these things that doesn't contribute at all.
Yeah, I think another thing you're talking about, because I remember a dance teacher explaining to us and then being disappointed that we should have been, because we were all circus artists and so strong in our core and could do loads of leg lifts and shit, that you should be able to do downward dog. So everyone knows the downward dog yoga pose without your hands on the ground. So, yeah. So we tried that, obviously, to humor her, but like, literally, like, you know, and someone said to her, you mean like a pike with a flat back, like a forward fold? It's like, no. It has to be a triangle shape, as you would, like you do a downward dog and you take your hands off. I can't do it because my core is not so strong, but you guys being so young and good at leg lifts and all this other core work should be able to do it. If you can't do it, your core is weak.
To break the laws of physics.
And it was just like, it's like I pointed out, it's like literally there's no way, like my center of mass is like, no, you can control your center with your core if it's strong enough. Suck your navel in harder. And like this is one of those interesting ones actually, because I was in circus school at the peak of the Pilates craze, and you had to do Pilates, and I'm sure Pilates is its own beast, and you know, but when in the first circus school I was told, I was like, before you do every single movement you have to suck your stomach in, you have to do navel retraction and hold it there for the duration of what you're doing. And, you know, cue a lot of people hurting their backs when trying to run while holding the navel in rather than just letting the breathing happen. Cue a lot of people just like, you know, it was kind of funny. There was one girl I can remember who was just like from a gymnastics background. She was ridiculously good at tumbling. Just, you know, could do anything basically on floor, no sprung floor, whatever. And it's like her trying to hold her stomach in and then tumble just like instantly turned off anything she could do. She just couldn't tumble, couldn't twist. Why? Because the core needs to move, extend, flex, extend in these movements. And then it was just told, like, she asked the physio who was like, you know, telling all this stuff, or was conditioning, whatever. Physio-led physio, blah. This, and their answer was like, yeah, your core is just so unstable. It's like when you stabilize it, your body won't let you do these movements because it's damaging. Versus
it's backwards logic.
Yeah. Versus her just being everything and not having any issues ever, because she's done gymnastics since age 4 and was now 24 and you know.
Yeah, but then it's I think that there's a lot of these types of principles that easily become like because they're kind of illusory fragilities kind of, and you're like kind of catastrophizing the body and like, oh my god, if you're not doing it like this, you're going to end up injured. That's something that everyone's been inside of various sports or exercise has heard again and again and again and again, whereas the body is adaptive, and you find people doing those things and being fine most of the time. So hey, like I think it's much better to just be kind of to treat the body as being resilient. And I mean, when it comes to the, like, for me, interesting, like the things that I do that are kind of the most quote unquote core usage is like if you do power moves in breaking, like the hard, like the most kind of the one that requires the most is doing flares, really good flares. You need like your everything, kind of your hip flexors and your obliques and your abs, the entire thing needs to be super conditioned very specifically. Like you won't get it just by doing hip leg lifts, but like if you do a truckload of flares, you just like your the entire kind of lower torso section is is basically what you tire out and what you work the most, because there's so many angles. You need to push and pull and twist and all kinds of crap with the entire area. So it's like, compare that to how I feel when I do handstands and even rather hard variations. It's so much more work. Same with, like, I mean, if anyone that just learned how to backflip and they throw like 15 backflips and woohoo, and they do like 20 more, and they come, they're like, their abs are going to be so fucking sore the next couple of days just because of that quick contraction you do there. So and that also leads into that other reasoning for the core myth, and that is gymnastics. We talked a lot about this in the past, that like you condition a gymnast to have this tension because they're going to use the upside down position while tumbling and so on. And of course, when your entire kind of career as a gymnast is like not only based on, but like a lot of the stuff in gymnastics is based on creating torque and force from that open chest position and the open back, and then whipping it close to generate power. Of course, you need to be a fucking monster there. But the relationship is just different and the purpose is different.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. It's like, if we look at any sort of competent gymnast, like they have a core strength far in excess of what they will ever need for handstand, but they need it for all their swinging skills, tumbling skills, everything. It's just one of these things. It's like how it's demanded. And it's also like, it's the idea of body shaping. This is one of these things people kind of neglect, is like, oh, we have like rocking on our core, like these core rocks and arch rocks and other stuff, because it's kind of like, it's the beginning of learning how to drive with your heels for tumbling and maintain your body shape in a dynamic motion. Whereas in handstand, we're in a static position. And it's the same with like a lot of the cool, like if you look at a lot of the body shaping drills in gymnastics where they're going from an arch to a hollow, arch, hollow, like hands and feet on springboards, lifting up and down. Other way around, upside down, sideways, holding out in extended positions. A lot of it is not so much for the handstanding skills, but for the high bar skills and the swinging skills, because it's this whole, to generate the force to go round and round in giants. Like, it takes a lot of strength and it takes a lot of like ability. At the same time, when you're going to be training 20 to 30 hours a week in gymnastics, if you're getting to high level, you need a kind of level of work capacity where like, I'm doing my swings, and I know for those 15 swings I do around the bar, I have the conditioning to withstand the 10 to 14 G forces that go round and maintain the hollow through that position, so then I can let it arch at the right time and then snap through to generate momentum. So it is like, this is the thing, a lot of the core training comes from gymnastics, and gymnastics uses handstands, but they're good on their hands because they can do presses, they can hold handstands, they do walking, they do all this other stuff. They're flexible. They've been doing it a very long time. This is what makes, this is what makes a gymnast good on their hands. It's not core. And that's the kind of mistake I think a lot of people pull out.
Yeah. It's connected in that specific discipline, and also in others. But the stacking the weight on top of yourself, if done with even without a great shoulder position, you don't. I mean, if you even do an arched handstand, you ask like you get a child to try a handstand enough times until they can. Like they won't need an enormous amount of focus or tension in the low back or anything to be able to hold an arch handstand. The only place where this where doing kind of a floppy handstand might be more significantly problematic is for people who are either like, if you are contortionist flexible, meaning that like you have so little resistance and so much propensity to bend in that direction, and you don't concentrate, you might very easily fall back into bridge. But for most people who keep falling over, it is most of the time it has to do with like they're just not able to do the work that they need to do in the hands and the shoulders early enough during the handstand, so that like things, like as you said, like the consequence comes higher up, and hence the legs go over. And like, I guess the other funny positioning as well, which is like, because there are two types of arched handstands, and it's kind of the contortion style where you have very closed shoulders and you arch in the lower back. Then you have the two open handstand, or Mexican handstand, which also leads into an arch, but then you're opening the shoulders too far. And the only position that can keep you rather stacked above your hands, depending on your body structure, is a position where your shoulders are over your hands to a degree. Whereas if you pull the shoulders behind your hands too much, like, something will have to give. Again, like Emmet said, you need to compensate, either by like sinking the ass a bit back, or by like letting the feet go over if you want to maintain balance. So this type of position, like that's how you start understanding the Mexican, even at like a very kind of tiny level. So it's and in stuff like Mexican, if you're trying to go deep, then you need to, like, it's interesting because in Mexican, I'm super duper stiff through my abs and my thoracic spine and stuff, as Emmet knows. It is absolutely dreadful, but there you in those you need to have like quite a good level of control over your entire abdomen and stuff, because you need to let the legs go far enough to start pulling you down. You need a certain amount of tension to keep them from just falling over, but you need to also be able to kind of relax in that sort of stretch, and it feels very much like similar to as in a bridge. If you go very into kind of towards your more maximal bridge, you'll feel it through the abs, and those will be stretching. It's just that this happens with an extra layer of tension when you're obviously keeping your legs in the air there. So there it starts being relevant. But the funny part is that it's if you're doing drills for it properly, it's like the body will respond by doing the appropriate thing itself to a large degree. Like, you might be cued in a good way, like, okay, try now to lengthen here, or blah, blah, blah. It might help in positions such as that. But like, the body's pretty smart at adjusting to these kind of things if your level of body understanding is high enough for the thing you're trying to do. Yeah,
it's this kind of thing of, there's a good case there actually with the Mexican. It's one of these things I pride myself on actually being very good at coaching the Mexican. It's one of the things I think I coach better than most of the other stuff I coach, or definitely good at like maximizing people's Mexicans if you see the people are trained anyway. But Mexican is a great example of specific physical preparation versus general physical preparation. To get to the point where you can do a really deep Mexican, and I'm talking like feet hovering off the ground Mexican, there's a huge amount of preparation that needs to go into your bridge first, and the active flexibility of the bridge and all that stuff. And you get that kind of first to a large degree, and then you will train the Mexican to go that kind of deep. You'll obviously be training balance drills on the Mexican, but there is like, we do general physical preparation and we build up a lot of the strength we need or the ability to contract in these zones. We build a comfort in our bridge, all these kind of things. And then we'll put it into the Mexican. It's the same way with strength training. Oh, we want to run faster. Well, we have our track and field season. We build up some leg strength, some power, we titrate it up, and then we go into track and field season. We go faster, hopefully. It's the same idea with the Mexican. It's like, you can train it this way, but in some ways it's more efficient to actually just train all the components first, get them really nice, and then put together a nice salad with them once you're done. So it's this kind of thing of, it's like, yes, we need some strength. This is kind of one of those things I'd like to talk about, like, what kind of strength do we need to handstand? What's a good way to train it as well? Because like, to say you need zero core strength is wrong. To say the core is all important is also wrong. But I think at various stages, it's like, you know, say, if I go back to my own teaching 5, 6, 7 years ago, like particularly when I would have graduated from circus school, so, geez, that would have been like 14 years ago at this stage. Fuck, I'm old. When I sort of graduated and was teaching around then, you know, I would have been like doing a lot more core work with people. It would have been like everyone had to do, you know, dish holds and other stuff at the start of their session. Whereas now I only really do them with beginners. And it is to build a bit of body awareness, a bit of tension and other stuff. But like, once you get to a point of being able to hold 60-second dish, 45, 60-second dish holds, or I don't even like dish holds. I despise them actually. But straight body holds are superior to dish holds. Because if you look at the side and your body shape looks like a canoe, it's probably pretty good for tumbling and rolling and other stuff. It's not great for handstand. So we want basically the straight body position over like where we're controlling the body, and everything is in a straight line on the ground. So bear that in mind. And I don't like tucked ones as well. I have my reasoning for this as well. So no one hate me for this if you like them. But in these kind of things, like, okay, they're very good for beginners. People who are just learning the basics of getting onto hands, can't rebalance yet, or just building the initial conditioning. After about 6 months of your training, like, you should be graduating onto harder drills for your kind of core training, or core. We're using torso training. Let's call it torso training. So if we think about all the stuff that's going on in the torso, like, okay, we want to be able to flex in all the directions. We want to be able to extend the spine. We want to be able to flex the spine. We want to be able to laterally bend it. We want to be able to rotate. A lot of these things will be taken care of in kind of hanging leg lift progressions. These are really good. Side blends for obliques, either standing or sideways out from a support. Back extensions. A lot of, like, people who train with me and sort of on my more direct students, they're also probably lifting weights. And we do a lot of this with, like, lifting weights. Oh, spine stuff. It's done with Romanian deadlifts. Oh, all this kind of stuff. And this builds up a great amount of strength. Then all the specific stuff of hip flexors and other stuff gets done in kind of compression and active flexibility work. So, but there's this kind of gap there where someone is getting their dish strength up and can hold it and it's thing to the point where they can do it. And then it comes into, like, transferring this general physical preparation of, like, okay, I can hold my body straight. I've built up some rough zone of awareness around a center position or straight position. The next level is, like, putting core strength into the hand balance. And what this really means is, like, building awareness with all the chest to wall drills. This is the kind of thing with the chest to wall drills, is they can equally be used to train. We can try and hold them for shoulders and build up our shoulder core strength. But at the same time, we can just be focusing on maximizing tension in these positions. So, like, okay, I'll squeeze the shit out of myself, not because I'm trying to balance, just because I'm trying to push the conditioning and build awareness of this straight position. So it's one of these other ways to approach it. Whereas, like, we get this a lot with, say, the push program, where people are like, why don't we train a lot of core? It's like, no. We are training and educating your core from day one. We're just not calling it that. Like, think about it. If we call the chest to wall drills vertical core stabilization exercise, everyone will be like, oh my God, they're learning to stabilize our core vertically. Core stability is very important. Oh, this kind of thing. Whereas we just call it a chest to wall drill, and most other coaches call it chest to wall. But, like, just depending, like, kind of what Mikael got at the start, is like, oh, calling it core makes it sound more important because it's the core detail. But at the same time, is it? Or if we renamed our stuff and rebranded it, would it be different? Would it have a different effect on people thinking?
Like, for me, like, what I think in terms of the understanding of all, like, the body parts, it's certainly good to like, in, like, as we've said before, any kind of acrobatic awareness or understanding of the body that you might have is going to be just in general good for learning other body awareness like exercises such as handstand. And the fact that you have, like, this body map developed to some degree, like, doing those types of exercises can certainly help you with that. Like, if it's a difficult coordinative struggle to do a straight body line drill and keeping your toes pointed and your legs reasonably tight, squeezing your butt, like, and holding your abs so that you're lifting your chest off the floor. If these things are difficult to do at the same time, yes, it might certainly be a good idea to work on, so that you are understanding where and what these pieces are. But what I think is the problem with the core idea is that since it's so focused on, people tend to look for it when they're in handstand. You go upside down, you start trying to pull here or push here or tense inwards or pull the belly button or, like, do all these things. And then you put one of your awareness points onto this, and it might be harder to focus on other things. And I always say, like, if it helps you to maintain your handstand to create a layer of tension in the abdomen, sure, please do. But it is, to me, the real question and the real thing that I think is important to kind of have as the main focus of it is the fact that it is not instrumental. It is not a principle that you cannot go without, because if it was a thing that was 100% necessary for good handstands, then you couldn't find people like me. And like, I remember I asked the people in Right Way Down as well, like what they do with their abs when they handstand. They're like, what do you mean? Don't really think about it. That's what basically everyone answered. And the same with like a dozen other hand balancers that I asked about this, like, what do you experience down in this part? Do you think about anything specific? And most people are like, nah. And again, then the argument might be, oh yeah, but all of these people are really good, so maybe that's why. And I've taught loads and loads and loads, and I know you have too, that like without having this kind of abdominal tension cue or needing to pull the belly button cue, like there's tons of people that got really damn good without it. So hence it is an option and not kind of a determining factor.
Yeah.
But also another interesting point of this, and that is the opposite direction from a Mexican, which is like arguably from the regular hand balancing vocabulary more important, and that is kind of under balance control, from stacking shoulders and folding at the hips, aka any kind of tuck or press to handstand work. There you're starting to do quite a lot with the midsection when you are going in front of the body. And I remember when I was like 17 and I was walking around with my hands and I had no idea what I was doing. And my legs started to fall down, and I just tried to keep my legs in the air. I used to remember that like my abdomen would like kind of crunch together, and I didn't know why, I didn't know what was happening, but it was kind of very heavy there. And I have a shoulder structure that favors presses to handstand compared to planching them or bending the arms. So I would naturally kind of do negative presses. And on that side of things, I find it fascinating because there you can for sure have some benefit from like stuff like hanging leg lifts, for example. Like it's just a staple, basic, good conditioning thing to be able to do if you're kind of serious about this type of training. But the fascinating part is when you're doing, or like to be able to experience the real compression in a press to handstand, you need to be able to do a negative, the way that I see it. Like it gives you the sensation of the compression in a way that almost nothing else does. Yeah. Because you start in the optimal placement of your shoulders, you crunch, like you open your legs. Let's say we do it through a straddle. You open your legs, like then you activate, like you pull from the hip flexors. You start pulling the legs towards your body, and you don't need to think about complicated cues such as like sucking in belly button or on anything. You need to bring the legs towards your body as hard as you can, and you will start folding together in that direction, and then the rest will depend on your ability to compress, both in terms of the flexibility that you have and the strength and ability of the flexors and the abdominal muscles and so on. But in that scenario, yes, there is tons, but it's a type of strength and it's a type of movement that you won't necessarily get to build in any other context. And I know people that are like absolute murder beasts of aerialists that can leg lift for days. Yeah. And you ask them to do a single negative press and like they cannot. So it's a very specific thing.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing. Well, I suppose the compression, you need the shoulder flexion strength as well. This is the kind of thing is like having these options in there. It's like I can bang out leg lifts. So what I was saying, I actually remember like we used to just have leg lift offs in school and be doing like, I don't know, 20 round the world leg lifts, going all the way up, like the ones you go in a circle all the way around. But like at the time I could do that. I was doing much more aerial and my handstands were shit. I could do like 20, 30 seconds, enough to tumble on, but not anything good. It wasn't until later when I started focusing on handstands and just train more that I stopped doing aerial. Believe it or not, Emmet used to be an aerialist. And and then like many years later when I was doing more handstands, I was I could not do that amount of leg lifts. Yet I could arguably bang out reps and reps of presses and other shit. And it's just like, oh well, where's that coming from? So it is kind of very specific strength. But then again, like, you know, presses were quite easy for me once I finally cracked them. So then it was like, oh, getting them that way. And then I had the reserve of strength that once I had the shoulder strength to match it, then it was very easy. And that's kind of the thing, is like we're dealing with general physical preparation doesn't necessarily translate to specific physical preparation. But once you have the specific physical preparation, it gives you a broader base on which to build on. So, yeah, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, yeah, it's always this idea, like core strength and core endurance and other stuff. It always just, yeah. I'm probably just showing my bias of being tortured, but I remember like our strength and conditioning classes, which were called strength and conditioning in circus, was always just core. That was it. It was just fucking infinite amount of sit-ups and dish holds. That was it. Just fucking sets of 100 crunches, and it wasn't even leg lifts. This is the kind of thing, like leg lifts and stuff were stuff you done in aerial. It wasn't done in strength and conditioning. Whereas arguably, like, you probably would have done better the other way around. But
yeah, and I think it's in those aspects as well. It's super important to have, like, as soon as you go away from just like the very basic general physical preparation, it needs to be sort of relevant for the type of practice that you do. Like, let's say, like, if I would like have an intermediate student that would that I'd how to say, recommend some sort of core training routine to, I'd be like, okay, yeah, first of all, focus on, for example, like straddle negative wall presses, like stomach to wall, because you can crunch really hard together. You get to work the shoulders at the same time as you work on pulling your legs to your body as hard as you can. A certain amount of reps of that, and from there on to skin the cats or just regular style bar leg lifts, for example.
Yeah, a brutal superset there for people if they want to try it is chest to wall straddle presses for like reps, aiming to get a set that lasts about 45 to 60 seconds of work, not counting your setup time, and then superset that with hanging straddle leg lifts. You'll probably hate me afterwards. Hanging straddle leg lifts are one of those things that people forget about because they're evil. It's one of those things, if you're super flexible, they're actually all right. If you're not flat to the floor in a pancake, they are brutal. And I suggest everyone tries them. I got a couple of other supersets and other stuff I'd like to give to people that I'd like you to try. Just to basically wrap up the podcast as well, I had a little reach into Emmet's bag of tricks just to try things out. One of the ones it's one of these things that I can't remember where I picked it up. It was probably in circus school, but it was actually from a gymnastics coach. And it was basically to build up endurance in your body tension drills. You want to fatigue the muscles you're about to use and then finish with a long static contraction and then do more reps. So the general format for this workout is some kind of flexing or extending action of the torso, a straight hold, and then more reps afterwards, deep into the burn. So a simple way of doing this would be do either floor crunches for 10 to 15 reps, heavy, focus on contraction, straight body hold, so dish hold for those of you who don't use my terminology, hold that for 45 to 60 seconds, and then repeat 10 to 15 more crunches. You could also extend this and you could do GHD sit-ups, a straight body GHD hold, and then more sit-ups, and vice versa. And you do that as one set, so the set will take about 90 seconds to 2 minutes to do. Then you will rest 2 minutes, and then you'll repeat it 3 or 4 times. Anyone who tries that out, tag me in it and give it a go. It's a lot of fun. You can also do this if we just think about flipping ourselves in 4 directions. So we think we have it on our back, we have sideways for the obliques, the exact same setup, and we have like back extensions. We can do these regressed on the floor, or you can do them, I say GHD, but for those of you who don't know the terminology, GHD is just a way to plant your feet. So you could also do them off the edge of a bench with someone holding your legs. And you could get, it's definitely a good buddy workout because you'll need a bit of judgment and encouragement from a friend to get you through it. But give that one a go and report back. It's one of my favorite little kind of like my core is weak circuits, or it's also one of my core is strong, or you just need more work capacity.
Get wrecked.
Yeah. It's horrible, but it's fantastic. It works very well.
Well, one just like side note before we wrap up. So of course important to mention like the side flexing stuff and flags. And that's one where, like, when you're learning one arms in the beginning, and like particularly for those who tend to favor a position where like the arm is perhaps a little bit away from the head and they balance a little bit kind of outside on their one arm, there'll be quite a lot of like tension and squeeze in kind of the obliques going through the lats and the serratus muscles and so on. Or like try to do an air baby on one arm and you'll feel that entire section of your body crunching like crazy. And I find this interesting when it comes to flags, because you can, like, you have the lengthening side and then you have the bending side, and like they of course they articulate at the same time. So you have the bending side. You can very often feel that you need to like crunch and pull yourself together as if you're like actively bending into a side bend, and the lengthening side is both elongating at the same time as you need to keep some tension there as well, so that your legs just don't drop to the ground. And the more pressure you put outside, meaning like if you would like straighten the legs more outwards, like doing towards a full flag and stuff, like it'll be increasingly demanding on your sides. So and again, those also are super duper specific, and you cannot bend further than your shoulder control will allow you to, because like what will happen when you reach your max point is that your shoulders will turn or twist, or like you lose balance basically. But it's very common to feel that like you're basically getting like just shredded to pieces in your sides as you're learning kind of deeper flags as you go. And this is one that like I have yet to see much other stuff than actual just flag work that helps for it. And as we talked about before, like flags are rather body specific as well. You have many ways to bend into them depending on the body structure and so on, but you will most of the time feel quite a lot of abdominal or like oblique action, to just be kind of specific on an area as you do them. But interestingly enough, like the better you get at them, as with everything of course, but you stop you stop feeling as much of contraction in there, and it's more kind of you just bend and lock, and that's of course based on the fact that you are strong enough to hold that position you want to reach, and the fact that your body is effective at the movement, so you're no longer just squeezing absolutely everything at once. Like you like the body intuitively knows what level of tension is needed. You go there, you hold, and you're actually also able to breathe, which is something that you might not be in the beginning. And also as a side note, in terms of that breathing thing, same thing for Mexican in the beginning. When you do Mexicans, feels like face is going to explode. You can't breathe. Breathing comes later. And same in a press too. And in a press, it's actually even beneficial, as I've talked about before, the cue of like basically feeling like you take a shit. That kind of pressure, that is what you're using kind of as the intra-abdominal pressure when you are lifting your legs up. But it's again a rather kind of automatic response that your body will start figuring out through learning negatives, rather than intellectualizing it and trying to understand and then like suddenly apply. And like it needs to be an intuitive process.
Yeah, definitely. That's what it comes down to. I think a lot of like the deeper stretch positions come down to this stretch tolerance or lack of apprehension reflex. So the apprehension reflex is one of these things when you're sliding into a stretch or going deeper into stretching, you're not certain what to affect. It's the body naturally keeps a degree of tension. It's kind of the classic of like put someone who can walk normally and then make them walk near the edge of a cliff that has no wind or anything, and then suddenly they tense up and drop the center of mass. It's the exact same kind of reflex in the body. It's like uncertain what's going to happen, tension. And it's the same in flags. Like until you kind of get used to this kind of stretched out ability, you will be tenser and fighting the motion. Whereas once you get used to it, you're able to actually just almost, I call it releasing into the structure. You're kind of releasing into your connective tissue is the way I would think about it. And using connective tissue in a very broad sense here. But it's that ability to release into it shifts the tension from a contractive tension to a passive tension. and then the contractive tension of the muscles are able to work more effectively because they've kind of passed on the load. So they've stopped working so hard, and they pass the load into the structure. The structure can take the load, and then when the muscles need to do something, they're able to work. Yeah, the Mexican and the breathing one, yeah. That's going to probably have a next Mexican episode at some point. But yeah, Mexican breathing. The first stage of Mexican, like when I'm training people on it, is just like getting them used to being able to just survive in the position. It's like, yeah, we built up the strength. And it's just like, okay, let's just, learn the correct shoulder and thing, and don't die. So I think that's a good thing to wrap up the podcast on. Don't die. Is in a Mexican. Or if you do, it'd be a good one. So there you have it. Some thoughts on core. Probably not extensive. And it's always that one. It's like, how much can you say about the core?
Don't exaggerate its necessity to do whatever. At least there are you have a limited amount of points of attention, and you might consider focusing on your hands and shoulders more so, at least.
Basically that's what I'd agree. Other than that, thanks for tuning in, and we will get you next week.
The Handstandcast is brought to you by Handstand Factory and is produced by Motion Impulse. Thanks for tuning in. You can find a full transcript of each episode along with the show notes and any relevant references on handstandfactory.com/podcast. Thanks to Isaac for editing and Jordan for transcriptions. Music by Daniel Horwath. If you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee on buymeacoffee.com or consider starting one of our Handstand Factory online programs. Links are in the show notes.